This segment of the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast is supported in part by Douglas Outdoors, serious rods for serious anglers. Go to douglasoutdoors.com and check out their new lineup of Era rods that retail under $100. Norsk Lithium, the lithium battery that you need is just a click away. Go to norsklithium.com and check out some of the lightest lithium batteries in the market with the best warranty in the business. Mariner Sales, located in the heart of the DFW Metroplex, Mariner Sales has the largest inventory of kayak and kayak accessories in North Texas. You can also shop online at marinersales.com.
What is going on, everyone? Welcome once again to the Bass Kayak and Beers podcast. This is the real life segment with your boy Armando, and this week's episode, I got JR Mocaby. We're going to be breaking down topwater frog fishing. It's still, although it's getting a little bit cooler, it's still a couple of months, still a few months away from, we're still having a good topwater bite, a frog bite, so we got to take advantage of it. I wish we would have done this show earlier, but in the season, but as it turns out, we're going to have it today, even though it's almost the end of August. But again, depending what type of, where in the country you live, if you live further up north, they maybe have a little less of a window of a frog bite. But for here in Texas, we still have a good 3 month, I would think, of frog bites. So today I'm going to have, like I mentioned, JR Mocaby. And this is the thing that I wanted to talk about before I get JR Mocaby. When you're doing a podcast, a lot of time you like to look for content creators or tournament anglers that have a big account, because if you get them on the show, then it helps you grow your channel more. If you get like bigger, personalities and with bigger accounts and bigger social media following into your podcast. But when and I'm guilty of that too. But when it comes to doing an episode that is more about fishing, it's not just my guest, but it's more about what we're going to be talking about, which is a how-to video or instructional video or information video on a bait. I really don't care to look for somebody that has a big account. I want to get somebody that knows what they're talking about in that specific subject. And I know for a lot of you that don't live in Texas, you may not know JR Mocaby. But for us Texans, everybody that's involved in kayak and bass fishing in Texas knows who JR Mocaby is, because he is an expert on topwater frogs. He has won multiple tournaments. I remember the last time that I saw him, the last time that I was part in the tournament that he actually won was the Lone Star Throwdown, where it was about 150 anglers, and he beat everybody with just a topwater frog. And he's very good at it. So I wanted to get him on the show because I think and I know that the information he's going to bring is going to be far more in-depth than anybody else I could bring here on the podcast, as far as I can tell. The guy's a hammer at it. And remember the name, because he's going to fish his first national tournament up in Toledo Bend in a couple of weeks. Well, actually at the end of September, so maybe like a month. So get used to it. You might be seeing his name more and more if he starts fishing national trails, but I'm sure he doesn't want him to build him up that much. But regardless, let's bring JR Mocaby. Buddy, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's going on, Armando? Thanks for having me on tonight, man.
Thank you, man. I know you've come to the podcast quite a few times, mostly to break down your win, but I've been itching to get you on the podcast to talk about frog fishing, because like I mentioned, that is your bread and butter, and you're so good at it. You've won so many local tournaments, with that bait. So I figure who better to talk about insight into topwater frog than JR Mocaby. So I appreciate you taking the time, man.
Absolutely, man. It's going to be a blast. We'll get into the nitty gritty and all the good juice.
So JR, let's dive right into it. Let's not waste time on it. First of all, when we're talking about topwater frogs, as far as the season in the year, and I know it's kind of relative to where you live, whether you live further up north or further down south or somewhere in the middle. But as far as Texas goes, where is your best time of the year to use a topwater frog?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. It's all relative, to where you're at in the country. Down here, here in Texas, I think I've caught a frogfish every month of the year before. So, depending on the lake, the conditions have to be right, time of day and stuff like that. But I mean, even in some other states that may have like power plant lakes or
Mhm.
some sort of lakes that hold a little bit warmer temperature in those kind of months, which may, obviously keep the bass a little more active. So you could probably get in on something like that, at certain times of the year in certain places. But for the most part, your early spring all the way up to late fall is a good general rule of thumb to throw the frog. Um, but like I said, if you got the right conditions on any given day, I mean, you can go out there in December and pick up some really good bites, big bites, mini bites. It just depends kind of what you're looking at. Water temperature is a big factor. Time of day is a huge factor in my opinion. Um, but yeah, just to kind of answer your question, it's for the most part it's relative, but for the most of the year, early spring all the way to late fall is a good time to throw that frog.
You talked about water temperature. What do you, when you look at your graph and you look at the water temperature, is there like a specific temperature range that you're like, all right, bingo, this is the juice. This is where top water frog is going to be best.
I do keep that in the back of my mind. That is a big factor, but I more so look at, other things as well. So like, do I have bait fish present up shallow? Do I have, maybe steeper banks? Do I have something that fish can relate to, hold to? Maybe there's a sunny bank that's hitting that side in early spring or even late winter that might present a fish up there. So you've got to look at all the factors. It's not just water temp, but water temp is, it's a key factor. But I more so look at, okay, hey, am I seeing bait fish? Am I seeing blowups? Am I hearing activity? And then also just looking for other, right factors as far as like having a little bit of depth that they can slide off real quick to where they don't have to go super far. Because a lot of times those fish will live, maybe they'll feed shallow, but probably live deep, in those like cooler months or warmer months. They don't want to probably be up in 100-degree heat when it's, the sun's beaming on them. But I do believe they have open windows to where they'll go up and use that shallow water to feed and just kind of create a surface to bust, bait fish, whether it be shad or gills or, whatever they're eating on at that time.
Do you feel like the atmospheric or barometric pressure plays a good part or plays a part in frog fishing? I know, like, oftentimes, we've been told, higher temperatures means slower bite, maybe throw a Cinco, maybe he finesse something small, something doesn't move fast. While if there's lower biometric pressure, God, I can't speak English today. The bite is more active. Is there something about that affects the frog bite in your mind?
I think so. I mean, on certain days that I've experienced being out on the water before, during, and after fronts, you can definitely see a spike in activity. Now, whether that be they're just hitting top water or they'll hit anything, they'll probably hit anything because I think they're feeding up so they can go kind of hunker down before whatever rolls through. Um, but yeah, I think it's just kind of like, kind of situational, really.
What colors do you think works best? I've noticed in the limited success that I found in frog fishing, I noticed two colors work for me: dark colors and anything that has like a red belly or a red spot on it. In your opinion, what colors do you think works best for you? And we can break it down in scenario. Clear water works, colors
Yeah.
work better. You know, muddier water, what colors work better, or time of day?
hmm I haven't played with red. That's kind of interesting. I could see where that could, be a factor here and there, maybe around crawfish or, something like that would mimic that. But I have not played with red. I honestly, I stick with black probably 95% of the time.
Yeah.
And that, it doesn't matter if it's clear water, dirty water, stained water, anything in between. For whatever reason, black, I've never had an issue with. They just seem to hit it. And it doesn't matter, like I said, any kind of water conditions. It's they'll hit it in any water conditions, in my opinion, as long as, time of year and the other factors are right as well. But whites, of course, around shad spawns later in the fall when they're really, pushing bait fish back. White's going to be a good choice. Any kind of translucent silvers, just anything that would imitate kind of like a shad profile or color. Um, that's what I would be picking up, especially those times of year. But pretty much the majority part of the year, I'm throwing black. It just, like I said, it works, and I've never had to kind of switch it up. Now, there has been situations where I have just wanted to throw something different, and I busted out um, like a yellowish white, something like that, just to give a little bit something different. If I go down like a bank back and forth and I want to go down again, I may tie on a different color just to see if I can get another couple bites. But and I've seen that be a player as well. I don't know what's to that, but like I said, it's just been kind of experimenting and kind of testing when you're like beating the banks, going back and forth. You want to just kind of switch it up, give them a little bit different look. But I've had good lucks with yellows too. But if I had like three colors, that's what it would be: black, white, and yellow. To be honest, I know a lot of people throw green, browns. I know they have good success, but I stick with those for the most part.
Yeah, good stuff. I feel like the same way. I think the black colors have given me a lot of success, and also, and when I mentioned red, it's just like the red belly. I don't
Oh yeah.
know if it's like I don't put too much thought into like the colors because they only see, in my opinion, and I could be wrong. They pretty much just see the belly of it. So, I mean, black because it creates contrast. I think that's going to help out whether it's clear water or muddy water. But I think especially on clear water, if they see that little rod, that and that applies to crankbaits as well. I feel like there's that little speckle of red on the belly. I don't know why. Maybe it's just maybe it's just coincidence, but I feel like I've gotten me more bites than others. Now,
Mhm.
when you decide to throw a topwater frog, are you exclusively throwing it around grass, or what are your favorite, not conditions but landscape to throw topwater frogs?
Um, Honestly, it's hard to answer that question because whatever lake I'm fishing, wherever I'm fishing, I'll have that frog tied on. It does not matter. Yes, it's great to have visual cover, whether that be some sort of grass, shoreline vegetation, lily pads, just to name a few. But it's great to have that stuff because fish like to congregate in that kind of stuff, obviously, and feed and hunker down, create shade. Um, but as far as like where I'll throw it, but anywhere, whether that be a dock lake, a rock lake, grass, obviously, lay downs, anything that has cover that's presentable right there. I know fish relate to, and I mean, and that's what I target now. You got there's certain situations too, like say overhanging trees, like this time of year. That's really hard to beat because it creates a big canopy. It's shade. You
Yeah.
can get it up under there, and they're positioned there to feed. So if any kind of bugs or anything were to fall out of that tree, they're right there ready to go. And a lot of times, like I've noticed, like if I'll skip it up under there, right when it lands, before I even touch the frog, they're crushing it. They're killing it. They're blowing up on it. And that's a telltale sign that they're just sitting there waiting for that opportunity for something to drop, whether it be a bird, um, you know, a butterfly, dragonfly, who knows? But
Cicadas at this time of year.
yeah,
Well, earlier
yeah.
in the summer, cicadas are like, man. That when I've not necessarily top water frogs, but I've thrown what is it called? It's not whopper ploppers. Oh my god, it's the one that has the little metal flaps on the side. I forgot the name of it. It's old school
Mhm.
top water bait. Oh, I
Um,
forgot the name of it.
you're not talking about a jitterbug?
Jitterbug, that's right.
Yeah,
Jitterbugs.
yeah,
I
that's old
love throwing
school.
a jitterbug where I see if I'm on a lake and I see, like you mentioned, overhanging trees and I hear cicadas, or even if I
Mhm.
see cicadas or dragonflies just roaming around that area, man, those if you throw one of those, you'll get some bites on it
Yeah,
because they're automatically, genetically predisposed to like hitting that what they would presume would be like a cicada or an insect.
yeah. I mean, and I've seen that too. Like that's now that I'm hearing you say that, I'm putting that in my mind. It's like the jitterbug, that action it creates is the perfect
Yeah.
action that mimics a cicada that is on the water. You'll see them doing the same type of motion.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good.
Jasper. Oh, and by the way, for those that are watching, I know we had a few questions already
Oh yeah, yeah.
on this on our live stream. We got, will this advice apply to big booty baits? Maybe. Then we have Jasper actually asked, "Do you use frog all year long?" Jasper, we started with that subject, and just to recap, depending on where you live, like if in Texas, you can probably use it all year long, but it mostly works out as JR was mentioning, between fall and late. No, I'm sorry, between
Like
early spring and late
late
summer.
fall.
Yeah, but it depends. February is always, I think, the wild card, because February
Mhm.
is usually when we get those huge cold fronts. All
Yeah.
right, let's talk a little bit about the different types of frogs. To me, well, there's three, but let's stick with the top two. I think that everybody thinks about, which is the walking frog and the popper.
Mhm.
When do you use? Let's start with the walking frog. When do you prefer to use like a walking frog instead of a popper?
I'm smiling and chuckling because actually I don't even throw a walking frog.
Oh
I don't
yeah.
touch them. Um, I only stick with popping frogs, to be honest. I think for one, I've never had a reason to switch over. And even in like dead slick calm water where a lot of people are like, oh, I want to throw that walking frog, something a little bit more finesse. For whatever reason, like if you start working that popping frog really erratic in that water, it's got a huge distance that kind of that noise and that water commotion on top, displaces, and fish see it from a long way. And like I've seen fish cruising from like 10, 15 foot if it's real clear, just tailing it, and then they'll hit it. But like um yeah, it's just just one of those things. Like for whatever reason, they'll just hit the popping frog, even when like conditions call for like what you would go by the book is, to use like a walking frog. I don't use them, to be honest. I know they work. I know people catch them
Yeah.
on it, but I'd always pick up that popping frog. I think it draws a little bigger bite too, a little bit bigger reaction, because it throws that big wake, that big bubble, and then it seems like something's kind of in a hurry to get away. And I think that causes that reaction. Where if you just have a little walking frog, yeah, it's going to create a reaction, but it's not in a hurry. It's not like, where like a lot of bass will be kind of fighting over a bait. It kind of,
Mm.
that's when I get that, thought that they really want to attack that. And I've seen it over and over, and that's why I still to this day don't throw a walking frog.
And for those that are watching live, if you're wondering, when we talk about walking frog, we're sharing the screen. This is the Gambler walking frog. Um, it's You would use it pretty much as a the same way you would use a walking bait, like a spook or a hidden walking bait. So I think what I've found success using a walking bait, and it's more where there's a lot of like grass, or those floating grass that are that a popping frog, probably the scooping action of that popping frog might actually get more line to tangle on the bait and make it a little bit harder to move, whereas a walking frog can kind of like easily move. You can easily move that through like thick cover. Maybe not thick cover, because if it's too thick, then you probably just want to use a punch rig. But where there's like a lot of grass. One example, if anybody has gone to Whitney Lake, the dam on Whitney Lake, which is the Brazos River, so the dam underneath Whitney Lake, there's a lot of those. I don't know what you call it, but it's just long grass. It'll go with the current. And I love throwing a walking frog there, because I feel like a popping frog. A lot of times when I pop it, it kind of, that scooping action seems
Mhm.
to grab a little bit more grass on the
Yeah.
line. So that's, I think, my advice. I'm not sponsored by any of bait companies, but I've often used I forgot the name of the Jackal Kiera frog, I think it's the name of it.
Mhm.
That to me is one of the best. The design on it moves a lot of water for a walking frog. Every time you just like try to walk it, it just displaces a lot more water than your typical walking frog from other companies, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I will, piggyback off that, like with the walking frog. There is instances where that is a better choice because of
Yeah.
like, through thick grass or even lily pads, like I've experienced, that popping frog's really hard to get through pads. Like I experienced this last couple weekends ago at Coletto. Like I was in some back of the pockets and found some lily pads, and it wasn't getting through it too well, and I was kind of having to rip it through. Whereas a walking frog would have been a better presentation there, because it'll easily glide over that. You can stop it in the pockets and the holes. Whereas that popping frog, you kind of got to rip it off those pads sometimes, and then you're missing your holes and stuff. So I agree. There is a time and a place for walking frog that is a better choice, like in those situations.
So let's talk, since you're more familiar with it, let's move to the popping frog. And again, I'm going to share the screen so everybody kind of like, if you're not familiar with frog fishing or topwater frogs, you'll know what we're talking about. I'm not promoting any of the baits that are here or the retail companies that are selling it. It's just as a reference, so you guys know what we're talking about. But popping frog. So you obviously that's your go-to frog. When do you like to use a popping frog? And specifically, how do you work it?
Yeah. So um, to answer that question, I like to use it all the time. But to get specific, so early mornings and later evenings are absolutely no doubt best times to throw a frog. That's when fish are really positioning themselves to feed right before, them kind of lunkering back down for the night, or those hot days, stuff like that. So those are your best times to definitely throw the frog. Now, there are bite windows too in the middle of the day. And honestly, it's a lot of times that I've experienced, it's been a bigger bite, a bigger fish. And I don't know if it's just because, it's a frog or it's a topwater lure that, is just sitting up there and it's an easy meal for a bigger fish. And maybe it kind of, decreases like a smaller average fish from biting it. I don't know, but it seems like in that midday bite, when it's slow, if you do get a bite, it's usually a better one, one that you're going to need for your bag or a cull or to fill your limit, depending on what you're doing. But yeah, it's one of those baits that, I like to have it tied on at all times, no matter where I go. But there are times in the day where even when it's hot, it's like, man, it doesn't seem right. But if you got conditions where you can find shade or something to where those fish are setting up at, it's an easy bait that you can throw anywhere without getting it really hung because it's so weedless. And then you
Yep.
can just, target those areas and really work high percentage areas instead of just going down banks and stuff.
The difference, I guess, between the walking frog also and the popping frog is the action, right? Like the walking
Yeah,
frog, it's kind of like the same, like I mentioned, like the same way you work a spook. And if you're not familiar with it, it's basically you have a little bit of a slack line, then you move and and you twitch it, and it'll go from side to side. But on
right.
the popping frog, it's not completely different, but very different. How do you work the frog to get the best action to attract bites?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So you're right. Like with the walking frog, popping frog, for the most part, components are the same. The materials are the same, hooks are the same. It's just the shape of the nose, is obviously that's the difference right there. But and that creates the action difference. But as far as how I work it, depends on time of year, time of day, all these things you have to take in as an angler because you're not just going to go chuck a bait, and not really think about anything all day long, hoping just to catch fish. You got to put it together. And like what I've found, like, the earlier in the year, the slower it seems like I got to work it because the water temps are still warming up. Those fish are still, somewhat cold. They're not acclimated to that warmer water and not as active. So I have to work it a little bit slower. And kind of the cadence I use is like a 1-2 walk, pop, or pop, pop, stop, pop, pop, pause, pop, pop, pause. And then I may work in a different cadence, like a 1-2-3, just to throw something a little bit different. And then a lot of times, in those earlier months, earlier times of the year, I'll let it pause for a lot longer. So you're letting it sit there after those pauses for maybe, 5, 6, 7 seconds. And the fish will tell you if you, figure out that pattern, and then you'll just stick with that for the most part. But yeah, but earlier in the year, it seems like you've got to work it a little bit slower, be a little bit more patient on the pauses, because a lot of times right before I go to work it on that, after that like 5 to 7 second pause, they'll blow up on it. It's just they're waiting for that next little movement, and they get a good look at it, and then it seems like they crush it and they get it good. But and as you're getting into like late spring, early summer, when water temps are warming up, yeah, that's when you can start working it pretty much as fast as you want. Unless it's just where you're like working it too really, really fast and you're not getting any bites, then obviously maybe go 30 minutes, slowing it down a little bit. That's kind of my rule of thumb, is like 30 minutes. I'll give it like a bait, a color, or a cadence 30 minutes. I feel like that's a good amount of time that I can cover on a bank to present it to a fish that, may potentially bite. But if it's not happening in 30 minutes, then I'll change something up to kind of see what it is that those fish want on that day. And then, as like I said, we're in the summer months, I'll work it pretty fast. So I may work at 5 or 6 pops before I pause it. And I'm only waiting like 1 to 2 seconds. I'm not waiting 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds. It's, these are warmer temps. Those fish are feeding when they are, and they'll come a good ways to get it. And then as you get into the fall, and then we start to see the water temps go back down, you can still work it really fast, because now those fish have a different mindset. They're feeding up for the winter. They're getting ready to go back out to their holes and just kind of sit and do nothing and get a big old fat belly. So you can work it really fast and erratic, even in the fall, even early winter, when those fish are still late feeding up. So it just depends on the time of year, for me, but I do got key things I look at before I just go making my mind up on what I'm going to do that day. Am I going to work it slow, fast? How many seconds am I letting it in between? And then, like I said, 30 minutes is a good rule of thumb, just to kind of give a bait or a cadence a try.
That's interesting. When you talk about rod and reel selection and line, what do you think is the ideal rod, as far as length, weight, and action for frog fishing?
Yeah, so this is very important too, because a lot of times someone may have too stiff of a rod or be way underpowered, and then and then it's the reverse effect. But for me, anywhere I go, a 7.3 heavy moderate is like my all around good frog rod. Whether I'm throwing it a good distance, because 7.3 will still give you that little bit of length to kind of get that bait out a little more than like your 7 foot. Because a lot of people do like a shorter rod for a frog too, especially when we're in kayaks. But for me, I found that the 7.3 gives me a good distance on the cast if I need to, but it's also not overly long to where it's not manageable in the kayak. So in the 7.3, I can still work from a seated position. A lot of times I stand too, but like from a seated position on a 7.3, I seem to not hit the water. Some people do experience that, and they need a shorter rod, and I understand that. Get a 7.2, whatever you need to kind of fine tune that. But that 7.3 allows me to like get the distance and the leverage when you go to hook these fish, because this is an almighty hook set. This
Yeah.
is breaking rods. You're trying to rip the head off. Like, you give it all you got, because those are two big meaty hooks, and a lot of
Yep.
times the fish that we're targeting, those bigger fish have that bony mouth, and you've really got to crack them sometimes. Um, so yeah, it's for me 7.3 heavy, moderate, and what that moderate action does for you, um, it allows you to walk the frog for one, and allows you to be very accurate because it's got a softer tip, so you can lay that bait up under trees, up under docks. And a lot of times, it's like if you can do that, like if you can go out and skip the frog and be efficient with it, you will put that frog in a place that people never get to and never have the opportunity at a fish. And I've seen it, like where I'm going down a bank and I'm like, oh, that guy's, he's finesse fishing out on the end, or he may be flipping or pitching, but like to get it way up under there, a lot of times in those shade pockets, that's where I'm getting those bites. And, there are times where I go through quite a few backlashes, in a day because of that, but that's just part of the game. Um, but yeah, you've got to be accurate, and you will definitely see the blow ups and the percentages go up if you can do it. Now, it is a tricky game, because once you get it back up in there, and they do bite, now you've got to get them out,
Yeah.
and that's where that heavy action allows me, and in addition to the braid, this is very important as well.
Yeah.
I'm using 50-pound braid. Some people use 65. Some people use 40. I think 50 is a good middle ground, to where, because bigger braid, it can be kind of difficult to deal with sometimes. So 50 I have found to be very smooth, very efficient. And I use the Seagar Smackdown braid, the gray stealth. I use that color. Um, it's hard to see, but really, a lot of times too, like going into the, where I'm throwing this frog is like, a lot of times people watch my videos, they see I'm kind of pitching the frog a lot too. Not necessarily casting. When someone thinks of a frog, they're thinking about casting it usually. But for me, I like to get up on the cover, be really quiet, real stealthy, and put that frog right in there, and then it's just hand-to-hand combat. Like we're so close to the fish that it's all boat flips, no netting, and giant hook sets, and that's just, in my opinion, that's the best way to fish. It's the funnest way to fish.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fun. It's interesting when we talk about rod selection. And before I make my point here, if there's anybody on the comment sections that will, if you have any questions about the subject of frog fishing, please put it in the comments. We'll do our best to get it answered. But going back to what I was going to say, one thing that I noticed when I started frog fishing, or using a frog, topwater frog, my first um, rod for frog fishing, the frogging rod, what we call it. I think it was an eye rod. Great rod. No complaints about it. But it was a 7-foot rod. It was the shorter rod because I guess that was the mentality of it. And then once I partnered up with Douglas Rod, I remember meeting Fred Contai, who's the rod designer, and he designed a frog stick or rod for frog fishing that is 7.6, so 7.5 feet long rod. And I remember talking to him in ICAST, which, by the way, love talking to Fred Contai because he's just like, his mind is always on designing rods. Like he's just looking for what's different out there, and thinking kind of outside the box. And I was thinking, it's like, Fred, that seems like such a long, like too long of a rod for frog fishing. But I've learned from what he told me, and then put it in practice, because I eventually got one of those rods. And what it is, it's like it's a heavy rod, but what it does, it's because it's longer, you're able to cast better. Because, and I think a lot of times when you're new to bass fishing, I think a lot of people don't understand this. A heavy rod for like a 7 foot 2 rod is a lot stiffer than a heavy rod that's 7.6, 7.4. Like until you like really try it, you don't really realize how big of a difference. It's like as far as casting, it's like a heavy rod is 7.6. It's like casting on a medium rod, just because it has a lot more parabolical bend. It's still a stiff rod, but it's because it's longer, the tip is going to be softer. And I was able to cast a frog without the backlash more than I would on a 7-foot rod, because even though they were both heavy, it's a stiffer rod, being that it's shorter on a 7-foot rod. So I had to like long cast it, like leave a little bit more line and do that sweeping hook, not hook,
Right.
sweeping cast, where you're just like fly fishing.
Yeah.
Whereas a shorter, or like a longer rod, you can kind of reel it down shorter and just like snap it, and you're not gonna get as much of a bird's nest or backlash on it. And it is a little bit like you said, on a kayak, maybe because a lot of those rods are designed for boat
boats,
fishing.
yeah.
On admittedly, on a kayak, it's a little bit more complicated, especially if you're like sitting down, because then when you set the hook, you have this swooping hook action, which is a lot different than a shorter rod where you get that snapping hook set. But what I've noticed is the movement on the frog is a little bit better the longer the rod is, because the tip of it's so much softer. But it blew my mind. I've never thought of using like a 7.5-foot rod for frog fishing, but as it turns out, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna get more bites, of course, because the fish don't care what rod you're using, but it is a little bit more. It's easier to cast, and it is easier to kind of pin them down, especially if there's like a lot of grass between where the fish bite and where you're standing, as far as the distance.
Yeah, that 7.6, that could take up a lot of line and real quick. And I get that concept. A little bit longer rod, more material, more flex, so it could be a little bit lighter as far as like maybe than like a 7 to 7.3 heavy. So
and Javier, first of all, Eugene, that's what she said. And Javier says, ever downsize? If so, do you need another rod for casting? That actually, Javier, was going to be my next question before we talk before we go into that, I wanted to ask about the reels, and then that was going to be my next question
Yeah.
because I
So
think those little frogs are amazing. I think you get a lot more
mhm,
bites in it. Maybe not the
yeah,
bigger bites, but before we address Javier's question, I wanted to ask you about the reel. Well, what reel do you not necessarily, if you want to, shameless plug a sponsor, go right ahead. But as far as speed
yeah.
and
Gear
bearings
ratio
on
line.
on
Yeah.
yeah on
Yeah.
gear ratio on a reel, which one do you think
Yes.
works best?
So just to give people context, I use Shimano Curados for that kind of aspect. For frog fishing, I use I think it's a 7:4 to 1 if I'm not mistaken, and I like that gear ratio for what I'm frog fishing. I know people frog fish differently, right? Like some people may
Yeah.
be frog fishing mats, some frog fishing like I am right up on the cover, so it's different. But my mindset is like a 7:3, a 7:4 to 1 gear ratio is perfect middle of the road. You know, you still have your torque, you still have the strength, but you still have a little bit faster ratio than like your sixes. So you can still pick up line. But for me, like a 7:4 to 1, I'm usually right up on the cover. So even I'm making quick pitches or little underhand skips up under docks or underhanging trees, I can get that bait back pretty quick. It doesn't have to be an 8-to-1. And a lot of times, like we need all the help we can get in the kayak because like if you've ever set a hook in a boat versus a kayak, it's a lot
Yeah.
different. Like you can plant your feet, you can put your weight behind it, you can really jack them in a boat. And on a kayak, we honestly we're at a disadvantage. Like for someone that jumps into a kayak and is fishing, like they don't even know that they're at a disadvantage. When talking hook setting and fighting the fish, like our boats move. So when we set the hook, especially if a fish is like buried in cover, our boat is moving towards them. So instantly, if you're
Mhm.
not real turning, you are losing slack. You know what I mean? So, and that could be very crucial the first couple seconds of that fight, especially if it's a giant and it gets leverage. So it's very important that real speed. But for me, like around the cover, I do 7:4, 7:3, anywhere in there between. I know there's different companies that make different speeds in there, but that's my rule of thumb is like just something in the middle that's still like when you go to set the hook really hard, it's not going to give out. You're not going to have something with um, not the greatest brakes. You want something that's good quality that's going to hold and tighten that sucker all the way down because you should be having the mindset that your equipment's not going to break, your line's not going to break, so you can just set the hook as hard as you want. You know what I mean? If you're using braid and that kind of setup.
Yeah, it's interesting with reels. It's just as cars, gears are gears. Like, you get a sports car, it's built for speed, but not necessarily torque. You get a
Yeah.
truck, it's not built for speed, but it's built for torque. And the reel is kind of like the same thing. You throw a reel that's really fast, you kind of give up a little bit on the torque and
Yeah.
handling a big fish
Hmm.
on their thick cover, which kind of like ups the ante, trying to get a
Absolutely.
big fish out of grass. So
Yep.
a reel is great. A really fast reel, like an 8 or 9
Hmm.
speed reel, it's great, but it doesn't offer you the torque that a lower gear. So there is that middle ground. I totally see what you're saying. You don't want something that's like a 6'1" or lower,
Yeah.
but you kind of want to be in that middle ground between a 7 and an 8, I think. That's a
Yeah.
great point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And like as far as like the faster reel for someone that doesn't know, like an 8 speed, 9 speed. I've seen 9 speeds nowadays, but
Yeah.
for someone that doesn't know, basically when you go to set the hook on a fish and you're reeling them in, like basically you're losing that torque. So you could be sitting there reeling and nothing's really
Yeah.
happening. You know what I mean? You just lose
Yeah.
your power, you lose your torque. So with a gear ratio down like a 7:3, 7:4, or even a 6, like you can be cranking on them and it's constantly moving. Like you're not losing that. You know what I mean? That torque. So speed's great, certain things, but yeah, for this kind of fishing, I think that torque's very important because, like I said, when we go setting the hook, we're already coming towards the fish. So if you're reeling and it's not doing nothing, that's even more slack in the line. So
Yeah.
it's very important. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. That's pretty cool. I think that's the most underrated part about frog fishing is getting that speed on that reel that is like we mentioned, not too fast, not too slow. Eugene mentioned curados are mini tanks. I mean, to me, in my opinion, no offense to anybody that's watching and is a fan of any brand out there like Daiwa or Abu Garcia, but to me, I don't think Shimano has any competition. I think, in my opinion, they're heads and shoulders above everything as
Mm.
far as reel goes. And that's their bread and butter. Shimano, not to plug in Shimano because I'm not associated with Shimano anyway. I wish, but I would love to get some free reels from Shimano.
Same
But
here.
even in mountain biking, which I used to do a lot before getting into bass fishing, the best derailleurs were made from Shimano because that's all they do. They just they're specific on gears, and that
Yeah,
applies to
gears
like
and brakes.
derailleurs on bicycles and speed on reels. So, I mean,
Mm.
honestly, I can't think of a better brand than Shimano. And again, I understand Daiwa was a great brand.
Yeah.
Abu Garcia is a great brand, and if you love those, by all means, go
Mhm.
ahead and do the one that you're more comfortable and first of all that you can afford because
Yeah.
those Curados are not cheap, and I heard they're going back up
Mhm.
real quick. I just saw a Tackle Talk podcast talk about the prices on the Shimano are about to
Oh
skyrocket
boy.
for
Right.
whatever reason, which we're not
No,
going
I
to
mean
get into.
like all the other brands, they
Yeah,
have good reels too. It's just I've always used Shimano. Like that's what my
yeah,
dad had when I would go fishing with him. So, just naturally that's what I've acquired over the years. And they
yeah.
are
No,
like
man.
like Eugene said, tanks. I can beat them up over and over and they just keep lasting. So
Yeah, they're good.
that's why I use them.
Best reels in my
Oh, and
opinion.
then
But
what was did we
oh,
answer Javier's
so Javier, so I wanted to ask you that because I got into you downsizing frog and using those little tiny frogs that they're hard to find. But I think I got the ones that I found was on the Spro ones. They're small. They're not easy to cast because
Mhm.
they're such lightweight. But man, I was fishing with a buddy of mine who's actually, I think he's still watching, Brandon Allen. We went to Ray Roberts and I was getting a ton of bites downsizing. I had got a couple of them, um, and then I hadn't used it. I was throwing a frog, and then I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting a bite on the frog. Let me downsize it. And again, they were nightmare to cast, just because they're so light. But have you thrown those little mini spros or whatever brand of that you tried?
Not the micro frogs. Like I know what you're talking about, but like
Yeah,
I haven't thrown anything like that. Now I have used like the juniors, like basically like a downsize from like what our traditional
yeah,
size frog is. Like for reference, I use a Spro Bronzeye 65. It's just a normal size. But like there's a junior and Booyah makes one too in the junior as well.
yeah,
And I played with those frogs, but I've never used like your really, really tiny micro frogs or anything like that. I think you're right. Those I think would be really hard to cast. You would want to downsize on your rod action for sure. And then also probably your line too, like maybe a 30-pound braid or you know, maximum 40, because anything above that's just going to make that frog really hard to cast. And if you have a really stiff rod, it's not going to go anywhere,
yeah.
especially if you're trying to throw into the wind. God forbid.
No,
But
it's hard to cast, man. You have
yeah,
to like really, leave like a foot of line and just do that sweeping action, and the accuracy is horrible. It's got to be
oh
like
yeah,
you can't just pinpoint it to
yeah.
one little spot. It's got to be like there's a grass flat and you don't care. You just want to get in the general direction. It's a
Mhm.
little bit, but I mean, I've gotten some bites on it. The reason why I started throwing it, I fished a tournament in Caddo, and I don't know if this has happened to you in Colorado, but after fishing, those grassy mats, when I got to the boat ramp, I didn't notice my kayak was full of those little micro frogs. They're like green with red dots. They're beautiful frogs, by the way. But I mean, they were. I was trying to get the kayak into a trailer. I seen jumping on them. Like, how did I not notice this when I was, making my way to the boat ramp? But I've started thinking, it's like, man, maybe if this little frogs right here, I'm wondering if this is what bass would bite. And I hadn't used them on cattle again, but I did use them on Ray Roberts, like I mentioned with my good buddy Brandon Allen. And man, I got some bites on it. It's just so hard to cast, man.
Mhm.
I don't even.
Yeah,
I
I could.
wish I would have experience and tell you what rod to use, but I really
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah, no, I could see that being just a nightmare and very hard to get used to. But yeah, it's definitely got its time and place because those micro stuff like that, people aren't throwing a whole lot of, so
Yeah,
it's a different look. But yeah, to piggyback off your experience there, it's like, man, if that's what's on your boat, there's a good chance that fish are eating those, you know what I mean? So that's in their natural habitat. So yeah, I'd be throwing those. And as far as like, to answer Javier's question, so not played with the micro frogs if he's talking about that, but like going back to the juniors sizes. Now, if I beat up a bank really hard and I go back and forth maybe 2 to 3 times and I've switched up colors and they're not hitting it, then I'll downsize to like a junior. You could still get away with the same setup for the most part. It's not like the micros where you're just it's not going anywhere. You can still maybe dial the spool tensioner back a little bit to kind of give you a little bit more freedom there, and then play with the brakes so you're not backlashing. But yeah, that juniors definitely have a place after, in my opinion, if someone's like went through a bank and beat it up really hard, or there's been several people and you just want to throw something a little bit smaller, bust out the junior. But it's one of those things like if you're tournament fishing, you probably do want to leave the bigger frog on because from my experience, it gets a bigger bite,
Yeah.
So it's, apples to oranges. It's what you're doing that day. If you're fun fishing, you want to get some more bites, downsize. But if you're tournament fishing, you may get some other bites, but I think it might decrease the size as well.
Agree.
Making tweaks to your frogs, adding.
So Eugene Moore asked, "Do you make any tweaks to your frog AI and adding JR's magic sauce?"
I
What do you do? Like
I
I've seen some crazy stuff, like people cut like one, the little legs. No, we're not talking about the ones that have the real legs, but this like the little rubber strings hanging out that
mhm.
look like legs, and they'll cut one to half, so they'll have one leg longer than the other. So kind of, I don't know, it maybe helps them on
Yeah.
walking frogs. Do you do anything like that? I've never done anything like that.
So yeah, to answer Eugene's question, I caress him and I sweet talk him a little bit right before the tournament. I give him that right touch, but no, there are times where I do shorten the tails up, the legs, whatever you want to call them. I feel
Yeah.
like sometimes they come too long out of the package, and if you've got like if you're getting short strikes, definitely cut them off, make the profile smaller so they get all of that in their mouth. But what it does is like when you trim one, it definitely allows it to walk better, because there's a difference in the leg sizes. So it's grabbing water surface and it's allowing it to walk back and forth a whole lot easier. Like
Mm.
you'll notice that night and day difference. If you go trimming them and you make one a little bit shorter and you start to walk, it's a whole lot easier. Um, and then there's one other thing I like to do, depending on the brand that you use. Some frogs already come like this nowadays, but like with the hooks kind of bent up and out, like
Yeah.
how used to you kind of had to bend them away from the body.
Yeah.
But I take, just like needle nose pliers and I'll bend them straight out a little bit just so there's a little more gap in there. But like I said, I like the Spro frogs. I was a big Terminator guy, but now they don't make those frogs anymore, unfortunately. So I went back to Spro, but I've used Spro throughout the years and they've always had good frogs. So um, what do you say? Even skirt definitely helps. Yeah.
Yeah, so Javier Benavides says uneven skirts definitely helps it walk for me. So that's the word I was looking for, skirt. Thank
Yeah.
you, Javier. I've never gone to, maybe I think I did at the beginning, but I've stopped doing it. Never thought it made a difference. But hey, if it works, man. Maybe I'll give
Yeah.
it more of a try.
But
Um,
that's all I do. I
yeah.
don't do anything other special. I've heard people putting rattles and BBs and crush them and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and that's little tricks you can do. But I've never had to do it. It seems like day in and day out with the cadence and the frogs and the colors I choose, I get bites. So why put other stuff in there? Just something
Yeah.
else to get in the way of the frog or the hook set and the hook gap. And yeah,
Yeah, I've heard of there's a brand, I can't remember which one, but it actually has like a little not an opening, but like a little latch or a little tab on the bottom where you can actually open it, put some rattles, and then seal it again. I can't remember which one it is.
I'm not familiar with that one.
It's got to be one of those brands that are trying to kind of make a name for themselves and kind of make something
Something different.
different. Oh, is it
Yeah.
this one? Let's see. The new Six Sense Hush Frogs has good hookup, stayed up pinned. That's George Wheeler. Hey, George says it.
Yeah.
There you
Yeah,
go.
I'll take
Take
his
his
word
word
for
for
it. He
it.
likes throwing the frog, from so I haven't used the Hush frog. I've used the Vega frog and
Yeah.
I threw that thing away after the first time because I had missed like 7 fish on it and it was like, what in the world? Like I'm not used to this. And it was right when it came out and I just never had good luck with it. So I may need to try that Hush frog. I haven't tried that one.
Yeah, I haven't tried it. I don't throw frogs that much. That's why I wanted to get you on the podcast because I know you're one of the best at it. And hey, heck, it helps me learn more about frogs. Basically, the ones that I think that have worked the best for me has been the Jackal Kira frog. and the Spro's popping frog. Those are
Is
the
that
two that I've used.
that jackal? Is it like real slender? I'm trying to
Yeah,
picture it.
a
Is
little
it
bit.
kind of
It's a little bit smaller, but what it
okay?
does, so you know how they sometimes draw the little legs on the front legs? This one is
Oh
actually
yeah.
like it's carved in. So the front legs, let me see if I can find a so what it does is the front legs works as like fins because they're like, it's not just drawn in, it's like 3D.
Oh, okay.
And it moves a lot more water when you work it. Let me see if I
Interesting.
can find it and share the screen. Again, I don't want people to think that I'm promoting because I'm not trying to get anybody to buy
Hmm.
into it. I'm just saying what I like. Let me see if
Just
I
for reference, yeah, just to
yeah.
see it.
Uh Man, I don't know. Let me see if I can.
While you're doing that, I'm trying to think of any other juice or good tips that I've
Yeah,
learned
anybody
from
has
fishing.
questions,
Yeah, any
put them in the
questions or
comments. Let
yeah.
me see if I can share the screen. So this is so you see right here on the front, that little
Oh yeah,
notch that creates a lot, that moves a lot more water than
yeah, I
your
could see that.
traditional frog, walking frog at least. That's
Hmm.
why I love it. And I don't know, I just compared to other ones, I feel like this every time I'm walking it, it just displaces more water.
Yeah, no, it definitely looks like it would, especially with that kind of being outward a little bit. So you know it's going to displace, more water than your traditional walking style.
So there you go. I think we have more comments here. Let me stop sharing
Yeah.
the screen.
Also, I do got another good tip, so we'll look at these comments and then I'll share another thing too.
Says Vega, no good. Hush. What?
Vega,
Oh,
no good, and then Hush is Spire.
oh,
Okay, so he's
okay,
had the same probably experience I have.
okay.
Uh, Shad
Shad
Pro.
profiles for open water or other conditions dictate colors. What do you think? I think
Yeah,
you
no, I
touched
can.
on it at the beginning, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I can get behind that. Especially around like shad spawns or going into late fall, where for the most part, largemouth are keyed in on bait fish. You know, that shad profile, whether it's white, silver, translucent, even in your clear bodies of water, stuff like that works really well. Yeah, if you've got open water, I still think you could probably get away with, the black frog and maybe like maybe the yellow frog that I throw. But for the most part, like if you're in open water, a lot of times fish are schooling up on shad. So yeah, I think the shad profile is probably your best bet there. Other conditions dictate colors. Yeah, so for me, like I was saying at the beginning, 95% of the time I'm using black. I think the contrast that black provides, whether it's muddy water or clear, they're going to be able to see it really well. And that's just a good rule of thumb is like, you hear it all the time in stained water, you're using black and blues, black and reds, blacks, just so fish have a more bold presence to see it because they can't visually see it as well until they're right upon it. But like that black just gives a little bit bolder contrast. And I think in any water conditions, it just gets bit. And I've noticed that. But if you had like, schooling fish and stuff, yeah, I probably would throw on a shad or probably would want a shad color just because, again, that's what they're feeding on at that time. You kind of want to mimic that, try to capitalize on those bites.
And to double down on that, Javier, I don't know if you were here at the beginning. We started talking about the colors. I like to use something with a red accent on the bottom. The Kiera frog from Jackal, even the black one has a little bit of a red accent on the bottom, and then some of the popping frogs that I've used also I try to have something that has a little red accent on the bottom of it. For whatever reason, it just gives me confidence. I feel like I get more bites in it. I think like especially on clear water, I think those bass key in on those um little accent colors. Eugene has a question too that says, do you have trouble with the legs sticking together? That's my only thing. I'm assuming he's saying only thing
Yeah.
on Spro frogs.
So basically, what happens a lot of times, like after you use them or whatnot, when you put
Yeah,
them away, the skirt sticks together. But what my remedy to that is, and this works with Spro, Booyah, any of them that I've used, it's like baby powder. So put baby powder in your tackle box or in your frog
really.
slots. Yeah, if you put baby powder in there, they'll never stick again. Yeah, you'll never have that issue. You bust them out, it's like they're fresh. I don't know the science behind it, but it definitely works. So try baby powder. Put that with your frogs, and when you go to use them, that they won't be sticking. You don't have to like rip them apart. You know how you have to do. Nothing like that. Just put a good dose of baby powder in there.
Never thought baby powder would come into this conversation. That
Yeah,
is pretty
I
awesome.
know.
How did you find out? Like somebody told you? Did you find out by accident?
No, I didn't find this out. I had learned through the grapevine a long time ago, and I honestly I don't even know where I learned it. It was so long ago, but it's always like I've always stuck with that because I probably like Eugene and other people like I've had to throw a lot of them away because they get so brittly, and then when you go to pull them apart, they rip, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh well, it's not the same. Yeah, you could probably go use it, but it's not the same. So for me, ever since I found that out, that's what I've always did and never had the issue.
That's
So
awesome.
that
There
may
you
work for
go.
other baits too. Yeah, I don't know, but
Eugene, there you go. That is a good question, man. That is awesome. Never even thought
yeah,
of that. It's
yeah.
like I wish somebody would have told me when I started bass fishing that you're not supposed to mix the cement TRDs with the rest of the soft
Oh yeah,
plastic. And if you haven't
yeah.
learned that lesson, people, anybody that's watching, listening, do not mix TRD soft plastics from Z-Man with anything else. I don't know what I missed that chemistry class in middle school, but what it does, it completely melts every
Mhm.
soft plastic that is mixed together in that. I lost a bunch of
Yeah.
lost a bunch of them. I thought it was the sun. I was like, it's not that hot. How did this happen? Then
No,
somebody
it's
told
the
me, no, you
chemical
can't mix them.
reaction. Yeah. Yeah, no, I've heard that happen. Luckily, I've never experienced it, but I've heard before,
Yeah.
not to do that. So now I don't even put them in the same box now. So,
Yeah. No, I've
um,
learned that the hard way.
but I do
Also,
got one other good tip,
right.
real quick. What I was going to say earlier. So, also what I found, and this isn't just with frogs, but like this is with any baits that you use, whether it's hard baits, soft baits, plastics, it doesn't matter. But using some sort of, garlic or spray,
Hmm.
put that on the frog, because a lot of times, like if they're short striking or maybe they hit it once and they don't get it and they get a little bit of that garlic taste. I think I personally, in my mind, like you throw back in there, they may want to get it again. Like if it's nothing's there, you know, maybe not. But like if there's a taste there and they get that, maybe that they put two and two together and they hit it again. You might get another opportunity. But honestly, your best bet's probably having like a wacky rig or something right there on standby for when you miss that fish. Throw in there, and a lot of times they're right there ready to eat, and they'll bite. I personally like a flipping rig because it's quicker. So like I'll use like a half ounce Texas rig beaver style bait. I'll have it ready to go right there. As soon as I miss it, I put the frog down, and I'll flip in there. But sometimes I'll throw the frog in there. It just depends on the strike. Like if I think they're super aggressive and they just completely miss it, I might hurry up and throw the frog back. But if they got a good look at it maybe and I was moving it slow and they missed it, I'll probably throw the beaver in there or something. Oh, follow up
So
baits, yeah.
yeah, so Javier just asked that. That is one thing that I've learned from was Jeff Isham taught me that. He
Oh
says
yeah,
if you get a miss on a topwater frog, have a Senko stick or wacky rig nearby. Just cast it right where you had that blow up. They'll bite, and it does. Like I keep forgetting to do that so much. Like man, I gotta. Oh, I wish I had a Senko tied on one of my
yeah,
spinner. It is
yeah.
such a great follow up bait because
It is.
depend. I mean, if you're in heavy cover, then that Senko's not gonna sink. You
Yeah,
know, then
yeah.
you're probably gonna have to throw um like a
If I just
punch
throw your
rig.
frog back in there, yeah. If you
Yeah,
if you don't got like a punch rig and it's too thick, yeah, throw that frog right back in there. But yeah, and that's kind of why I use that half ounce weight with that. Going back to his question, like what I use is like a beaver style bait, so like a Reaction Innovation Sweet Beaver. There's also, Strike King makes one as well. Every company has their own sort of beaver style bait, but anything like that, just to put it right back in there because that fish was active. It wanted to eat. It was in an aggressive pattern. And, a lot of times they'll hit it right after. So what's your
yeah.
take on bait fuel on the
So
legs?
Brandon Allen says, "What's your take on bait fuel on the legs? What do you think?"
So I haven't used bait fuel, but I have heard people doing that and having good success. It's something that I have not experimented with because the garlic I use seems to work. And I'm not going to say what I use, but it's garlic. So, but yeah, I don't know about bait fuel to be honest. I haven't used it. but I have heard through the grapevine it could be the deal.
It's like a fish attractor. Um, do you think it would be whatever it is that you use? Do you think it has to be, since you don't want to say what you use, but do you think it has to do with the accent color or the taste or the smell that might emit is more than so than the color?
Yeah, I think a lot of times, yeah, it's probably more so than the color because I'll douse that thing, in it, so I know that when they get it, they taste it or sense it, or there's something different about that frog in particular. And maybe a lot of times in my mind, it might be a higher percentage to get another bite in there if it's like real thick cover, or like I said, I'll have that Senko or Texas rig right there ready to go too, and it's probably got garlic already on it too. So it's like everything's ready to go, with that scent because you got to be quick with it. That
Yeah.
fish was wanting to eat right then and there. If you fumble around and you got to reach behind you, I did that too where I've forgotten to put the rod out and they're not there.
Yeah.
So you got to be quick with it. You got to have it ready and pretty much rigged, ready to go. So
Yeah. I think on heavy cover, like I'll start off with sometimes with a frog.
mhm.
And if I get a mist blow up, usually to me, I'll use like a frog like an as a search bait. I was like, all right, I gotta blow up. I'm gonna switch to a flip in or a punch rig.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
because I
yeah,
think and just kind of like in that general area. So to me, sometimes I'll use a frog just as a search bait.
mhm.
Again, blow up. All right, miss the blow up. Let me go back, throw a punch rig, and then I'll keep throwing the punch rig until the bite gets slow, and then maybe I'll go back to a frog.
Right.
Um, Eugene says, plus the garlic allows the frog to slide through cover. That's a good point. I didn't think about
Yeah,
that. Yeah, that might be a
yeah.
good point.
Adds a little slick, coating
Yeah,
to it. It's already
that's
a
not,
good skipping bait, but yeah, that can't hurt it for sure. So, and like I said, a lot of times this time of the year, you have to get it up and around shade if it's middle of the day.
so one bonus frog tip that I wanted to talk to you about, and I didn't mention this before we started recording, but this is something that I've had a lot of success. And I discovered this by sheer accident a couple of years ago. I was fishing a lake up in East Texas. Actually, a lake that on one of my recent videos that I was fishing with Cameron Smith, I told him before we picked the lake, that I told him, hey, if you go to that lake, I promise you, you're gonna. I didn't say I promise you, but I told him there's a good chance you're gonna you break your PB, and he did that day. It's a great
Nice.
lake for frog fishing, but I lost the frog that I was using. I got it tied at whatever. I can't remember how I lost it, but I lost it. So I didn't have any topwater frogs. So I started using a Zoom horny toad on a single hook on a spinning rod and reel combo.
Mhm.
And that day I tore them up. Like literally, I was like getting bites. And there's something about those horny toads zoom on a single hook that works so great. And what I think is like it's a completely different action than bass are accustomed to. They'll see a whopper plopper, they might get used to a whopper plopper or a buzz bait, but
Yeah,
they hardly ever see that type of bait with that type of action and noise. And I
yeah,
think they get attracted to it the most. And it's great because on a spinning combo, it's a lot easier to skip under trees and docks and all that.
mhm.
And obviously, you don't have to worry about bird's nest on it. But man, have you ever used it? Have you ever used like a single hook, soft plastic frog on a single hook?
Yeah. Actually, I do use the Zoom horny toads, and I also use the rivet style from
Yes.
Stanley, which is now I think a different brand bought them out recently, but it's still the same. They're the same frog, same materials and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do like those single hook baits. I think they're definitely more finesse. So, if there's like a clear water lake and it's, the bite's really tough, yeah, I may opt for something like that. That may get me a little bit more bites, whether you're throwing like a green pumpkin, a white or a black, whether you're imitating gills up there that's really finessey kind of
Yeah.
up near the surface, or you're imitating a frog running across the water. But yeah, there's definitely time and place, and I opt for those more so around the fall for whatever
Yeah.
reason. I think that's a great time of year, just like a buzz bait. But like it's a good search bait. You can cover a lot of water with it, and a lot of times in that fall period of time, like those fish are chasing bait fish, so it makes sense to throw something moving because naturally that's already what they're looking for. So, and then if you match the hatch with the color, then it could be a really fun day.
Yeah, no, definitely. So anybody, if anybody hasn't tried it, I highly recommend it. The downside to it is you're using a spinning rod. It's usually going to be like a medium. So if you're fishing through heavy cover, and I've done it on heavy cover, but it is kind of a nightmare once you get that bite to actually land it.
Yeah.
Because you're in for a fight if you're using like a medium or even medium heavy rod, on a frog on,
Mhm.
a grassy lake. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean, and when it comes down to getting a bite, I think I've gotten so much success out of it, and I completely love it. And the castability of it, and
Mhm.
able to kind of like skip it without having to worry about backlash, to me is king.
And that's a
Javier does
different
have a
hook.
question again. He says, how how you cast and land your frog matter? So I personally, I believe so. A lot of times, especially like Lake Hado, they always tell you, go for those tree stumps. But what they don't tell you a lot of times is like, man, even a Senko splashing would scare them off. Like you would
Mhm.
throw it, and if it makes a big splash, you'll see that wake completely go the opposite direction. So I
Yeah.
definitely think it scares them in some aspect, depending on the mood that they're fishing. But in your experience, JR, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the head too. Is like what mood are they in? Because
Yeah,
I've seen it go both ways. It's like I've seen it where I've crashed it in the water like a bowling ball, whether I've skipped and hit something or I have thrown it over a tree limb and then it just splashes right down on them. A lot of times they'll bust on it right there, like where you
yeah,
would think, oh crap, that was a bad cast. Like I just scared that fish that could be up under there potentially, but no, they just come out and smack it. So, and then I've also learned where like I'll throw up on the bank and I'll see something spook and like
yeah,
leave, and I'm like, was that a drum? Was it a bass? Was it what was that? And then I'll go maybe another several yards and it happens again. So then it's like, okay, maybe the casting does matter. Like they don't want it splashed up on them like a bowling ball because that's maybe not natural. So you got to lay it up in there, and I did that too. Like where you just got to lay it in there to where it's super quiet, or hit the bank and then just kind of slowly work it in because then that's about as natural as you can get if you want to be honest. Because the frog is coming from the land to the water. Um, so yeah, that's what I would do. Like if you're
yeah.
experiencing
That's a good
uh,
point.
a bite that's not, if you're experiencing a bite that's just like where you're seeing fish scatter from the areas you're casting, maybe try landing in there a little softer, a little quieter, a little bit more finesse, and then kind of seeing if you get bites. But yeah, I've noticed both ways. It's not one way or the other. It is, you've got to, figure out what mood they're in because you may land it in there and they'll kill it, or you may scare them. It just depends on the day.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, since those hooks on a topwater frog are usually kind of like hugging the bait, they're not as prone to getting snagged. Worst
Yep.
case scenario, I mean, throw it up at the bank
Yeah,
because
exactly.
that's where frogs are
Yeah.
coming from. You throw it out of the
Yeah.
bank and just start moving it.
Yeah.
That way it becomes an even more natural
Yeah.
bait when it just throw it off the bank. But yeah, like one thing that I've learned is if you feel like they're getting scared of the water of the splash that it causes, what I've done, and it has worked sometimes. I'm not gonna say it works all the time. I mean, you'd rather be safe than sorry. If you can be stealthy, I would pick stealthy over,
Hmm.
try to
Every
be
time.
as stealthy as over every time.
Yeah,
But
every
again,
time.
like you mentioned, sometimes they're in a feeding mood and you throw them right at their face and they'll immediately
It
attack
don't
it. And
matter.
actually, now that I think about it, it happened up in the Texarkana area. I went fishing with my buddy who's watching, Brandon Allen, and I was throwing in a frog at the reeds, and at one point, something, I'm assuming was a bass, something got so scared of that splash that it created this huge splash that it's even scared me. I'm like, what the heck was that? And then swam the opposite direction. So it does happen. What
Hmm.
I would say is if you feel that that's happening, Javier, just throw it out there. If you created a splash, let it let it stay there for a while. What I've learned and what I've heard is like when you throw a popping frog and it creates a splash, as soon as you see the ripples are done, because it'll splash and then it'll create, some ripples, and you see that ripple circle just coming out. Wait until that ripple circle is done, and then start moving it, because that, I think what that does, it's kind of like once the water stops moving, then I feel like the fish might come back up to that area.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can't say it works all the time, but I've had some
Right.
success doing that.
I was going to say, just to piggyback, it definitely is both ways, because what I've
Yeah.
seen is like, like fish will, it's yeah, it's just both ways. It's not one way or the other. You know what I mean? It's just like I've seen it happen too many times where you'll throw it in there, and it could be the loudest, the loudest splash, they'll crush it, and vice versa. So it just depends. You're
Yeah.
right. It's not one way or the other for sure.
Yeah, it really does. I think a lot of it has to do with atmospheric barometric pressure. If they're like high pressured and they're just looking for shade, they might be scared. But if they're like in a feeding frenzy, then if it's just the best way to analyze it, I would say, if the bass is where it is because it's looking for cooler shade or cooler water temperatures to kind of like relax, it's not gonna bite it. It's just gonna go away. It wasn't there to feed. It was there to relax, and you just disturbed it. Now if that bass is moving up shallow to look for baits to feed on, then that's where they'll attack it as soon as it hits the water.
Yeah, and like going back to the rings, like you had mentioned, so like if the fish like, if it's a slow bite that day and like you throw it in there and maybe you're letting the rings settle, they get a better look at it for sure.
Yeah.
But I've also seen to where like it looks like a bait just fell in the water, whether it be over a tree or a dock or whatever. And then if you move it real quick, it looks like it's a scurrying, animal or whatever that was away because it just fell in the water. So I've literally seen it work both ways, to where it may be where you have to let it sit and like let the fish adjust and get a good look at it and then move it. Or you may have to move it right away, so it looks like something's running away, like, oh, I just fell in the water. You know what I mean? So it can, it just depends.
Yeah, there's no like 100% guarantee
Yeah,
this is
there's
what
not.
you have to do. But that's why we love this, man. If it were that easy, none of us would be doing it. We'd be bored. We find some other challenge that would
Absolutely.
stress us out emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
Well, JR, I've had you for like an hour. I really appreciate it. What do you got coming up as far as tournaments go?
Yeah, man. So we're about to hit it hard here in September. I have, let's see, Texas Bass Nation Championship on Lake Louisville coming up. I think that's on the 13th, if I'm not mistaken, of September, somewhere around there, mid-September. And then after that, the end of September will be the Toledo Bassmasters Kayak Series is coming over. So that'll be my first national trail that I want to participate in. And then after that, it'd be a quick turnaround for the Lone Star Throwdown. So, some big events coming up.
Are you doing the native bass? Such a
on Fork?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big Bass Power Hour, native Big Bass Power Hour, something like that.
I was
no
thinking
limit
about
Big
it.
Bass Power Hour.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I made that trip last year, and it was like, man, I went right there, no pre-fishing, fished the event, and drove right back, and that was a young, just like, that's a young man's game. You know what I mean? Like with no sleep and
yeah,
that was rough. So I don't know. I may try to get down there and do that event, but with all these events coming up, I may just kind of stick to the ones I've got on the calendar. We'll see.
Yeah,
I would love to get down there though.
I don't know if I'm going to do Toledo. I don't think so, but I'm definitely. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to try to pre-fish for the Lake Louisville, the Texas Bass Nation Championship. And if you're going to be there now, I know I really got to pre-fish. And then I plan to do the again the native Big Bass Power Hour, no limit. Which, Brandon, if you're still watching, dude, we got to get an Airbnb, man. I'm not going to do that 2.5 hour drive on one day and come back. Like JR mentioned, that is a young man's game. And trust me, I am a lot older than JR. I can tell you that right now.
I'm a young man, but in my mind, but it was still a rough trip.
Well, you have 2 kids, and I don't have any kids, so that's why it kind of evens out.
But yeah, when is that event? That native? That's
October 4th. Yeah, October 4th.
October 4th. So that's actually before the throwdown, right? The weekend before the. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I probably won't
Oh,
do
the
that
Lone
because
Star
that'll be the
Throwdown.
weekend
That's
before
right.
the Toledo, and I probably won't be able to swing the Toledo event and that one. So,
Yeah,
but yeah,
I
we'll
know.
see. It's a lot of
Yeah,
tournaments.
we gotta, get the permissions.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Gotta make sure
uh,
all the stuff's done,
yeah, we
all
gotta
the
make
daddy
sure
duties.
everything is done before we get that approval. All
Mm.
right, buddy. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. Everybody that chimed in, I really appreciate it. Todd, Brandon, True
Javier,
Goy, I don't
Eugene,
know who that is.
Keith.
Jasper, Javier, Keith, Eugene, everybody that commented, George Wheeler, thank you so much for joining us. And you can follow us on Bass Kayak and Beers, Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. So thank you again. Thank you to my guest JR. And remember, if you're going to be in the water, please wear your PFDs and enjoy your fishing. Water temperatures are going to start cooling up, everybody. So go get them.
Get ready.
Yep.
I don't